Danganronpa is a crazy franchise. I want to make a crazy amount of videos covering it because I love that craziness to its core. However, everything has a beginning and an end, and today I'll be covering the beginning, Danganronpa Trigger Happy Havoc. Spoilers for the Danganronpa games and Danganronpa 3 anime ahead. So, I'm hoping you've actually gone through the games before, since that's what I'm primarily covering. Though, who knows, the future arc shares some characters. Anyway, what I'm covering specifically in this is something I've seen a lot of people mention, and that is the atmosphere of Trigger Happy Havoc. I don't know about you, but it's depressing, isolating, and claustrophobic. It's like Twitter or 4chan. There are immediate things you could attribute to this fact, such as the environment being a school that you can't leave, or the fact that it's so dark because of the killings on Monokuma. But there's always something deeper behind the scenes, though we aren't talking about Nagito's mental state this time. I'll scratch the surface, sure, but I'm going in for the kill immediately afterwards. Call me Celeste. Why is Danganronpa Trigger Happy Havoc so much more depressing than its sequels and spin-offs? Time to figure it all out, and time to not mention Nagito for a while. Danganronpa Trigger Happy Havoc is like a bar set for the other mainline games in the franchise. It's the first, yet surprisingly unique in terms of atmosphere. I think the most immediate reason for this is a sense of new, fresh content in each game. Like how Danganronpa 2 follows the characters experiencing Jabberwock Island in place of Hope's Peak Academy, or the V3 cast killing in the Ultimate Academy for Gifted Juveniles. The thing the latter two have in common is their use of the outside world, whether it's a whole island or an exterior section of the school. This already gives a basic look into the sense of claustrophobia, but there is, of course, more. I wouldn't even call this scratching the surface if we look at it like an iceberg, but more like the sky layer. Let's go a little deeper, as there is plenty to cover in this video. Just be happy we aren't discussing the Titan that is V3 yet. So, I've been talking up this whole thing for the last two, albeit small chapters. Let's scratch the surface and get that itch out of its hair that it doesn't actually have. Firstly, this is not the most unique out of the three games in my opinion, as that title can go to V3 by a landslide. However, that's the topic of the next video. In Trigger Happy Havoc, the world of Danganronpa is completely new to the player, and have never been touched on prior. Even for pieces of media such as the Kirigiri light novels or Danganronpa Zero, which take place beforehand, they were created afterwards. For players at the time or blind ones playing this first up, it's mysterious and disturbing. The other two have some form of expectation backing them, and I'm sure you would have thought once or twice about how similar the game would shape up compared to the last. Formulaic tends to describe a lot of Danganronpa's story, so this statement is given in the world of Kazutake's disturbing creations, starting with the letter D. However, what specifically is unknown and fresh in the story, the atmosphere, and overall substance of Danganronpa Trigger Happy Havoc? Well, I'm glad you probably didn't ask. Immediately, the environment as I've touched upon. Being locked up in a school suddenly with no prior explanation is scary, and surprisingly similar to V3 as it's a reboot. The difference is wondering what the outside world is like. You start the game assuming it's normal and that people would be assisting and saving you, but over time, such as with the photos of the participants' loved ones being killed and removed from their photos, you tend to question how exactly Monokuma managed to pull all of this off. Even though it was already sinister through the aspects of the literal killing game taking place, it only grows in extremity and becomes more threatening throughout. This naturally makes you, as I said, question the status of the world around you, and with the plot twist in Chapter 6, alongside even just the fabric of the killing game and the people around you as well. Not being able to go outside is a surprisingly prominent part of both character dialogue and decision, being a good chunk of Sayaka's motive to kill. The characters are as confused as you, and it shows. Of course, you'll wonder what the outside world is like when you both cannot see it and have never seen it, besides in the beginning cutscene with Makoto entering the school. Danganronpa V3 also plays with this in Chapter 5, but it doesn't hit as hard due to the outside section of the map. If I had to describe the feeling of what all this sums up in 2 words, it would be mystery and claustrophobia. As well as this, the students and player are being thrown into a game they have both no control over and have never participated in. This results in both a feeling of powerless suffocation and once again, mystery. When they're thrown into a class trial, both them and the player have no clue what the hell is going on, and it is super obvious. However, both of these things dissolve over time throughout the story, and it's time to needlessly analyze this. I believe the reason the feeling of claustrophobia slowly fades is due to the decreasing number of students, increasing locations, and increasing size of said locations. Compare the Floor 1 places to things such as the dojo and gardens. Of course, the gym and dining hall can be compared, but are there other places in later floors? Not exactly. More space, less people taking up the space, and maybe even the fact that the students get to know each other more. The initial suffocating claustrophobia of being surrounded by strangers becomes seemingly missing with said victims of murder. And finally, one last thing on claustrophobia and mystery. But as the students learn more of the outside world, is it truly a prison anymore? If the rest of the world is in the same amount or even more to spare as they are, then there's almost no differentiation between the two. It's more like they're in a part of the world than trapped in despair at that point, which I also think contributes to the ever-fading feeling over time. A leitmotif of cameras and always being watched practically floats like a storm cloud over the characters' heads, far more than in the other games. All these things that go unmentioned and you adapt into the sequels are so fresh and scary in the first. Everything is horrifying in Danganronpa Trigger Happy Havoc. You lose your closest friend and have to fight for your life when surrounded by people seemingly better than you. And you've been framed. Everything is against Makoto and Aegi in the first chapter, until they get to the door frame. Also, they totally screw over Makoto in Chapter 5, just figured I mentioned that. Can we talk about how disturbing some of the deaths are in this game? Danganronpa 2 is a little too funny for it to really sink in sometimes. It's a banger job when it works. And Danganronpa V3 is both too silly and too brutal, with too much going on to really have that moment of realization. However, Trigger Happy Havoc has a good pace in telling you to contemplate these things. Have you seen Leon's execution? Like, really felt it? It's so basic, yet so screwed up. He's getting pummeled by balls in front of everybody after screaming the words. Stupid, 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 stupid! He's powerless, and like Mukuro, being used as a demonstration of what happens if the Blacken screws up. On top of that, there's a deadpan to the audience, the students, afterwards. They're all shocked as to what happened to Leon, and it really shows. The music goes out. It's perfect. It wasn't exactly sad like a lot of the other executions, just really screwed up. There's also the bodies, which look truly dead. Sayaka's body, it wasn't over the top, not played out to be crazy, just pure reality. A single knife dealt the killing blow, and she just looks lifeless. Not upset, but lifeless. Imagine how Makoto felt in this moment. The first person being killed being her. Hell, even I was shocked. It stuck with me the day I saw it. It was amazing for the cold reality of the killing game, and just also the fact someone around you did it. The face of Chihiro was horrific to look at. His wide eyes, open mouth, it's so lifeless, but in a totally different way to Sayaka. He had more to do, had ambitions, and yet he's been brutalized. I mean, Sayaka did too, but it's a bit different. It's in the killing game, you know? All the deaths so far have felt so crushing, and the victims were powerless. Chihiro couldn't fight back, Sayaka desperate, stuck in a bathroom with a broken wrist, and Leon, tied to a pole unable to move. Mondo is a little different, but you could argue he's had this coming for a very long time, since he quote-unquote killed his brother. He was powerless as he was in a fit of rage after all. As bad as Hifumi was in Chapter 3, he was coming from a powerless standpoint. The manipulation of his mind really sells the same vibe with his death, and I'm sure Taka didn't foresee anything that unfolded in that room where he lay dead. He was still grieving Mondo's death after all, even if he didn't seem like it because he was actually Goku. Things like this can be considered as a two-edged sword in a way. However, it allows Kodaka to really sell a character as in peace or evil when needed. Celeste wasn't powerless, and if she was, she overcame it mentally. She manipulated 2 deaths and was completely safe from the murders, not even committing both of them. The way she hides this is by appearing powerless, which I find funny. It's as if Danganronpa Trigger Happy Havoc is at peace on the concepts of power and powerlessness at this rate. Another subversion of this is with Sakura, where she had the power over a situation that ended herself, and even if it stemmed from a lack of ability to do anything. She grabbed the situation and took over it all, ending things on her own terms. Kyoko does say she was not weak, but strong till the end. Also, with Celeste, just realised this while reading out the script, maybe Celeste had that dose of powerlessness because she was saying she had to lie about the recreational room. She was saying she wanted to survive in the school and that this was a good way to do it, but she was lying to herself and to everybody else. That's a lack of power. She had power over herself, but not power over a situation, right? That killing that she committed, that was the only form of power she ever had. And maybe that's why she seemed the most evil then. And also over Hifumi when she made him make her tea. Junko was depicted as evil through her sheer power over anything. Hence why the unique event of Mukuro being used as a demonstration occurs, in my opinion. Whoever the mastermind is in the end, they had power, and used it for the wrong. People like Sakura and Makoto use it for the right. This may also be why the game feels less tragic over time, as less powerless students are being killed off, and why Case 1 feels so screwed up when put up against the rest. With Danganronpa 2, people like Byakuya, Mahiru, and Chiaki die. Also more people. The only truly powerless people in these stories, in my opinion, were Ibuki and Hiyoko. Neither of them did anything explicitly wrong in cases specifically. Ibuki lost her power with the despair disease, and Hiyoko never had any, to be honest. This could be why Chapter 3 is so disturbing compared to the others, the theme of power. It does remind me of Trigger Happy Havoc a little. As well as Ibuki and Hiyoko, I take the Chiaki statement back. Chiaki was definitely powerless. She didn't even choose to kill people, though she was the moderator, administrator, whatever you want to call it. But yeah, she was powerless because she didn't have any control over killing, and Nagito used his sheer power of luck to do it. Like, that's crazy. Anyway, V3 has Ryoma, Kaede, Angie, and that's where it ends. Quite a faithful reboot with the lack of power in the victims, but it just doesn't justify similarity between the two games. The murders are just a bit more depressing than usual. Pretty gloomy game after all. The brutality in this game is inconsistent. Same with Danganronpa 2 and I reckon V3 is the only consistently brutal one throughout the whole game. I would argue Trigger Happy Havoc doesn't peak as much in this category, especially with things like Sakura's body existing. However, it makes up for brutality and the disturbing nature of the game, as I've said. I feel like Danganronpa 1 is the most twisted of the bunch, and Danganronpa 2 is the most memorable. Danganronpa V3 is the most tragic. Anyway, while Danganronpa 2 and V3 have ideologies such as hope, truth and lies, or Kaito's beliefs, Danganronpa Trigger Happy Havoc has an ideology almost every time someone dies. That might be a bit of an exaggeration, but I've seen comparisons to the 7 Deadly Sins, but of course, there aren't even 7 cases. Worth looking into it now regardless though. Byakuya carries the ideology of materialism and once again power. He also happens to be the most antagonistic of the students, which I find interesting again. Aoi carries extreme beliefs about her classmates in Chapter 4, though I won't jump too deep into it. On top of this, Chihiro has her moment of wanting to become strong, and it dives deep into mental fortitude versus physical fortitude in the trial, which I enjoy. There's then some grievance from Taka and his fight with Hifumi over Alter Ego, which I feel like has some relevant meaning in the place of this chapter of the video. As the game is the first of its kind, it introduces Junko and Ishima and an ideology as well. All the characters are very individual, causing their deaths to hit harder. There is a theme of distrust always being held over you like a bone to a dog, and it's evident when the original title of the game was literally Distrust. There's a theme called Distrust, which is totally Kyoko's theme. And speaking of Kyoko, Makoto and her have a whole dynamic of trusting or not trusting. Makoto places trust in everyone. That is why he goes through the things he does in this game, which I also think is comparable to Kaido. It's like, oh my god. So hear me out. Kyoko and Makoto, right? Positive guy helps out the detective. right? It's obviously the opposite to Shuichi though. She's already cold. She needs to learn to have more emotion and show it. But then, right, in Danganronpa V3, the main character is the detective, and the side character, the main helper of the protagonist, is the Makoto. He's very positive. He's a bit more forceful though. He's also the opposite. Shuichi and Kaito are like foils to Makoto and Kyoko, and they have reverse roles, but they have the same role, if that makes sense. I don't know what I'm going with. Anyway. Now, comparing this to Danganronpa 2, the theme of distrust isn't played with in the same way, the students even having a party in Chapter 1. I feel like the prologue really shows us that this game will be tackling the opposite side of the spectrum, actually having a traitor this time. All the students share similar ideologies, hence why they became the ultimate despair as a group, and that's evident. They all have equal power majority of the time, besides Nagito, the isolated one. The one that thinks differently, and even works in ultimate despair differently to the others. I think Chapter 4 is beloved because of its relation to Danganronpa Trigger Happy Havoc, with a claustrophobic environment, desperation, and more. The motives are a lot more direct in the second game, while in Trigger Happy Havoc, they rely on the students' mental shortcomings to do the job rather than the motives themselves. Secrets being revealed, loved ones going missing, money, and more. Danganronpa V3 shares these qualities, though groups are a lot more prominent with things like the Student Council, Rebellion in Chapter 1, or the three main heroes. Truth and lies are directly linked to trust, and they literally have a serial killer amongst them. Not very trustworthy, to be honest. As Trigger Happy Havoc's motives trigger people's responses rather than affecting those people directly, it plays with that concept of trust. Do you believe in the people around you when presented with the motives? This question isn't even answered in Danganronpa 2, not even in Chapter 3. They don't even think somebody else killed Nagito in Chapter 5, as the themes of trust were skipped somewhat. It's like they still have that bond that they did when they were not going mental. In Chapter 5 of Danganronpa 1, the students are completely split. Kyoko and Makoto hardly even know what's going on. It's a complete mess of the group, but it improves. The reason I love the dynamics of the first game compared to the second is this. After Chapter 3, it feels more like a closely knitted drama of a small family rather than a large game of strangers like in the beginning. It changes a lot, which doesn't happen very much because of the changes to Chapter 4 and 5 structuring. The students are all spread apart in the elevator, but in Danganronpa 2, they're united. Finally, the main thing that made me want to make this video, on the themes of trust. The protagonist doesn't feel threatened in Danganronpa 2 or V3, right? At least not being murdered. Even though Kaede does get offed in the end, there's never an aura of concern from the Killing Game's protagonists. However, Makoto does feel in danger for parts of the game. In Chapter 1 when he swaps rooms with Sayaka, in Danganronpa If when he literally almost gets killed, rest in peace, and in Chapter 5 when the mysterious person with the knife is standing there. Was that in Chapter 4? Anyway, even the class trials, which are built off trust, Makoto was almost voted out in Chapter 1, and is voted out in Chapter 5. It's sort of a full circle thing, as he's threatened in the first and the last of the normal cases. Now, I'm going to touch on Danganronpa 3 for a moment, so, once again, spoilers ahead, as it has a Killing Game in the future arc. Makoto, in fact, almost kills himself, and would have if it weren't for Juzo. There's a deep threat in that suicide game, and Makoto is in the crosshairs of it. Perhaps another reason Chapters 3 and 4 of Danganronpa 2 are scary is because Hajime is being streamed the video in Chapter 3, feeling threatened as if he's the focus, as well as almost starving to death in Chapter 4 and almost entering the final deadly. I hope that sheds some light on the dynamics of both the students and protagonists. There is a lot of truth and lies in Danganronpa Trigger Happy Havoc, and even if it isn't Danganronpa V3, maybe that's why Danganronpa 2 is such a vibrant adventure. It doesn't touch on stuff that much. At least not that stuff. Danganronpa V3 could have been awesome if it took some more notes from the original game, since they're so similar. But then again, it's possible Danganronpa V3 was more of a reboot of the franchise rather than the first game. Actually, I think that is what happened. But you can still take notes, they already existed, man. The video's almost done already. Shocking, crazy, amazing. Alright, so I've touched on the silly little big guy that we call Monokuma, but I want to talk about him some more. Specifically what he takes away from and returns to the students, and the relation of power those decisions hold. Monokuma takes the memories, freedom, and ability to do basic things from the students, while in Danganronpa 2 they're given the utmost freedom and he wasn't even the one to take their memories. It's the opposite thing having an identical effect. What despair this brings, huh? Along with this, Monokuma is a lot more transparent with his diabolical plans, and the students hardly believe him at times. They aren't disciplined by Monokuma and Danganronpa 2, which makes the killings more of their responsibility. It isn't even a question that people will kill to leave at this rate, almost always killing because of their personal gripes or situations. It's like the killing game is more of a vent Discord channel than an actual killing game. Only Chapter 4 offers this experience, literally having a statue of Sakura, a character from the first game, which was also very powerful. Trigger Happy Havoc is the complete opposite, Monokuma making sure the students do what he wants, which makes it far easier to sympathise with them when they screw up. I think the lack of freedom is what makes it sad, like forcing a puppy to eat when he can't anymore. It's the same with Danganronpa V3 as well, like, the Exorcils, they're the most forceful thing ever. Oh my god. I'd like to remind you I prefer the second game. I just truly admire the first's abilities to be so damn depressing, and I've felt that way since I went through Danganronpa 2 and eventually V3. Also, this video was primarily inspired by Mandy Lovely's video on the same topic, or Dangan Mandy. I remember feeling strongly that the game was different, and seeking out a video to validate that opinion. All I'm doing is going deeper into this rabbit hole, since I like just doing that. I also think the motives being more forceful is a good choice for games such as Danganronpa 2, due to the fact that their typical freedom is ripped away for a period every chapter. Monokuma breaks people, and you get to see that in Danganronpa 1 and V3. And I guess a little bit in Danganronpa 2 with Fuyuhiko, it just doesn't hit the same. I don't know if you're aware, but the community agrees the endings become more annoying over the course of the franchise. Like, jeez, Junko, just stop, man. While I love the first two, that's irrelevant. I'd like to touch on the reason for the first ending's lack of controversy and overall positive reception. Beginning with the tragedy that is this killing game in specific. While all the three games try to do this, Trigger Happy Havoc does the best job at emotionally fueling the ending. It feels like it's like the story of a normal AAA game, like, it's so memorable and it feels like you're really playing through it. With Danganronpa 2, it kind of feels like you're watching, at least in my experience. I don't really know how you guys feel, but, the tragic deaths and atmosphere that I've talked about feel this ending, and especially the way it ties everything together, like with Sakura and Mukuro's deception. The fact they are all friends only worsens the damage of this scenario, and I feel awful every time I watch Danganronpa, the animations opening and ending. Of course, the other games also have this concept of memory, besides Danganronpa V3, so I guess just Danganronpa 2, but it doesn't hit the same, man. The use of the outside world that's been hidden in the last case helps the climax and heartbreak of their situation, crushing their one single hope: to escape. The other games are more inherently complex, having more than one main hope between the students, I feel. However, Trigger Happy Havoc sticks with its guns from the beginning. Alongside this, the themes of power make seeing Junko for the first time somewhat anger-inducing, but tragic simultaneously. This person is behind the countless doses of despair of the students and possibly players experience. I want to say, when she came in with a British accent, I was mind blown, like, oh my god. Also, with her, when she had that really sad, unenergetic voice, I was like, who is this? Was she forced to be Monokuma? I'm so confused. It was such a good mystery. Honestly, I love Trigger Happy Havoc ending. You don't feel this in other games, as I was more focused on the fact she returned rather than her actions. So much more memorable things happen in the game, such as Alter Ego, Mukuro's death, Sakura's suicide, Makoto's execution, and Kyoko's rebellion against Monokuma, and even her execution. Like, what happens in Danganronpa 2? The video game plot? The beach party? Like, in-class trial twists are a lot better, but, there's not very much twist outside of class trials, and it's not overwhelming either in the first game. The game's structure is so unique compared to the other two games. Kyoko's rebellion is the main thing I'd like to discuss for a moment. The fact she's breaking the game over time gives a sense of anticipation and risk, as you're in total danger, only contributing to the threat of Makoto's death that I mentioned earlier. Thank God he survived that execution. When you need a cover for Kyoko each time she disappears from the group, it only adds to risk, socially as well. All this risk leads up to Junko's reveal, and alongside this, the fact this reveal was never planned by Monokuma, but instead came from Kyoko and Makoto's rebellion, makes this ending feel deserved, like a real payoff. You had to fight for it, by coming back from your execution. Every other one was scripted, well, not V3, but it wasn't built up. Just happened by chance with Kibo's hair. While discussing this, it shocks me how intricate and carefully threaded the story of this game was. Everything is literally and thematically connected, and the fact people like Sayaka and Chihiro die yet further the story is great. I like those Kaede, Chiaki sort of characters, even Kaido to an extent, but only when it doesn't feel a little forced or inconvenient to the story.
Danganronpa.
Ultra Despair Girls. I said all the games. You might be a little confused why I'm bringing this up as my last point, but hear me out. This game is heavily connected to Trigger Happy Havoc, sharing characters, soundtracks, and most importantly, the heavily screwed up vibe. The skies are pure, bloody crimson as innocent Kamaru Naegi, Makoto Naegi's younger sister, is struggling to survive. This, in my opinion, is like the true sequel to Trigger Happy Havoc, Danganronpa 1.5 if you will. And you got Danganronpa 2.5, it's kind of even. Toko Fukawa experiences character development, vital to improving her as a whole, and even the experience of the first game to an extent. Seeing Toko doesn't really piss me off anymore. I'm gonna just be frank. You play as the other half of Makoto's family in his generation, and you see the outside world. Not even in Danganronpa 2 do you see the true outside world, so this is the first time. It answers the question left in the end of the first game and builds on it. It's debatable if it does a good job, but It also has relatives and friends of Danganronpa Trigger Happy Havoc characters, giving the other half of those characters as well. Hiro's mum, Celeste's cat, Chihiro's dad, etc. However, it utilizes the tools from Danganronpa 2 as well, since it was made afterwards, such as Nagito Kamaeda. Though I feel as if what creates the disconnect is changing Trigger Happy Havoc's main strength, the atmosphere. This game doesn't follow themes of trust and distrust anymore, regurgitating hope and despair. They're giving us more of a look into themes of power. Monica has power over everyone, including those with power. Kamaru's main adventure is finding the power within herself to make big decisions and step up the situations. Toko finds confidence, which is power as well, and has a very OP power called Genocide Jack. Anyway, that covers this game. Oh wait, it doesn't cover the game. Makoto and Byakuya show up too, which I thought was nice. He's saving somebody rather than being condescending. So it kind of shows that he's using his power for good now. Trust is cool, huh? I like the foils to the original concepts with the characters, but there definitely could have been themes of trust with characters and dynamics like Kamaru and Toko. I mean, she literally betrayed her. Or Haji and Monica. Even Nagito with pretty much everyone. Like, who trusts Nagito? Me. This game is isolating too, after all. Not as much, but a big part of the story is Kamaru's desire to escape Tower City, which she lit starts the game locked up in her room. Why did you draw a parallel with the first game, huh? So it kind of says here on my script, right? It says, be yourself again, big text, and the text is at the 20 size, like on Google Docs, the size of 20, so I guess I gotta talk about myself now, huh? Well, just a little bit. I mean, you can always leave. I'm not gonna have an outro or anything, but I've wanted to make this video for a bit, not as much as the Nagito video, because I love Nagito so much. Like, I love him. I love him. But with Trigger Happy Havoc, it's my least favorite game, I feel like, but I truly do admire it, right? And I wanted to talk about this for a little bit, but most of the time I was just curious. It's only recently that my desire popped up. And I guess that's because after making the Nagito video and seeing it kind of blow up compared to my other videos, I feel like I can start doing this a bit more, you know? I can start growing my channel through this, and I can start giving back to the community that I love so much, giving back to the games, and helping the community not die forever, because it's kind of in the hospital and life support right now, not gonna lie. Hope Nagito doesn't die too. But yeah, also, as I've been writing this script, I tend to research, right? But not too in depth, because I like coming from the heart. I like really putting my thoughts on paper or my laptop and then recording it and putting it into a video. So as I'm writing this script and reading the script too, I'm starting to connect new things that I didn't think of earlier. Like, I had initial concepts what I was going to talk about, but things like Kyoko's rebellion against Monokuma, that is such a big difference to the other games. There's no rebellion besides trying to kill the mastermind in Chapter 1 of Danganronpa V3. Like, it's interesting, right? I love that. That kind of stuff makes Trigger Happy Havoc so independent. But V3, note, is still more unique. I will never go back on that statement. But anyway, I just thought that was really interesting. The creative process of the script has been a lot quicker, and hopefully the video editing will be too, but it's been so enjoyable listening to the Danganronpa soundtrack while writing this. God damn. I hope this receives some positive support as well, and if you enjoyed my videos, subscribe, because I'm making a ton more of these. I'm going to be making more cool thumbnails, I'm going to be recording more interesting things, and my main priority is both hoping you guys enjoy it, trying to keep you guys watching for 4 minutes, because I really like to get my messages across, and as well as that, I'm trying to cover things that haven't been covered very much. Like, uh, this was covered with Mandy Lovely's video 3 years ago, but it wasn't extremely in depth. Like, it laid out the basic stuff that I'm talking about. Like, he had the same points. Like, she had the same points, but yeah, I tried to go a bit more in depth because I'm really passionate about this stuff, guys, and I hope you enjoyed it. The next one is going to be why Danganronpa V3 is the most unique in the franchise, and I hope you guys enjoy that because it's going to be I don't know if it'll be a long video, but it's going to take a while to work on. Imagine all the footage I have to go through. That game is hella long. But I got plenty of music to work with, so, Anyway, bye. Remember to subscribe and like if you enjoyed the video. Because, yeah, as I said, I'll be making more. I love Nagito.